Talking back tonight, let's take a look at a few news stories that you may not be aware of at the moment. With Talking Back the Night, regular Nathan Bray. Hello, mate.
Everybody.
First of all, secret Pentagon reports reveal US created ISIS. They're not trying to fight ISIS, they actually created ISIS.
I know this is hard to believe. I know, because let's face it, the big fear porn story being pushed at the moment is ISIS, isn't it? We got told there's going to be an attack at Mother's Day, Anzac Day. You know, there's always going to be an imminent attack, and we're pretty afraid as a society. Would you agree?
Well, yes, and it seems that the authorities or ASIO are snuffing it out just at the last minute.
Yes. Now, ISIS, this week, I read this, for example, in the Courier Mail, ISIS now claims the group will have nuclear weapons within a year. That's scary.
That is.
And then you've got this story today out of news.com saying thousands of women are being brutalised and sold into sex slavery by these ISIS militants. My favourite, though, Christian, is definitely the one where the ISIS soldier was going to fly to Africa, catch Ebola, and then catch a boat to Australia and kill us all in some kind of contagion, right?
Yeah.
But the big story, I guess, is Tony Abbott. He's now coming out and saying, if you go abroad to break Australian law, if you go to kill innocent people in the name of misguided fundamentalism and extremism, he's not going to let you back in this country. Right? Not to mention the fact that Australian soldiers went to work under a false and misguided ideology and killed over 1 million people, but we're not going to refuse them entry back into Australia. I'm a believer you don't blame the bank teller for the crimes of bankers, right? So the question here is, who exactly is ISIS? Where did it come from, and who's behind this new evil force in all of our lives?
Yeah.
Well, the latest bombshell news, all right, and this is now basically the secret is out. The Pentagon report, which came straight from the Department of Defense, has revealed that the US created ISIS. That's right, the US created ISIS as a tool to overthrow the Syrian President Assad. That guy that allegedly did a chemical attack on children. Turned out that the UN actually disagreed with that. So basically now there's this US Department of Defense document confirming without doubt that the so-called Syrian opposition, or ISIS as we call them, or Al-Qaeda, etc., okay, that opposition was in fact created by the US along with Turkey, Jordan, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and they specifically sought to establish safe havens in Iraq and eastern Syria, precisely where ISIS is now based. Now remember, as a result, America now is effectively behind ISIS. So this report was obtained, of course, by a court case for a freedom of information, etc., right? So according to this newly declassified US document, the Pentagon foresaw, that's right, they knew in 2012 that there would be a likely rise of the Islamic State and as a direct consequence of the strategy, but they described the outcome as strategic opportunity, right, to isolate that Syrian regime. I mean, this is pretty crazy stuff, Christian. I mean, it's like Dr. Frankenstein created a monster to terrorize the neighborhood so he could buy their houses back for 20 cents and a dollar.
Right.
And then he just tried to distance himself from the monster by giving him a name like Kevin. You know, that's effectively what's gone on here. But I reckon it does make sense, considering Australia has never had an ISIS or an Al-Qaeda attack ever since 9/11 in Australia. It makes sense considering Israel has never been attacked either, and we're actually caught nursing ISIS soldiers back to health in their own hospitals. And it makes sense considering the US accidentally dropped ammunition like 23 times to an ISIS soldiers. Many of the beheadings are being faked by the forensic experts. And remember a few weeks ago that Sydney High School principal who was criticised to hell for telling future jihadists not to fight for ISIS because it was run by the US or by the infidels. This really puts things in perspective for Australians, I think, and we have to have a really good look, I think, at next time we go to war. Because we've got to really work out what's going on, and I think we should just maybe defend Australia and stay out of it all.
What's going to be the final outcome to all of this?
Look, I think the final outcome, to be honest, is they're trying to destabilise the Middle East for, political reasons, geopolitical reasons, and so on, and corporate interests. But I think that eventually the Middle East has got to start to say, redraw its borders, which we gave them in Pico sites after World War II, etc., and come up with a place that they want to live in. And we need to get rid of all this money being made by these US weapons manufacturers, which are just causing grief all around the world.
I'm talking to Nathan Bray on Talking Back the Night, taking a look at a couple of news stories which may or may not be covered by the mainstream media at the moment. One thing you may have heard about, McDonald's has reportedly dodged $500 million in Australian tax, Nathan.
That's right. International food giant, I like to call them, McDonald's, has avoided
Well, you've described them as maybe a non-food giant in the past because apparently a court ruling said it wasn't fit for human consumption at one point.
That's right, but that was by a guy on a cooking show, right? But the reality is they've avoided paying $500 million of tax in Australia over a 5-year period. How did they do it? Well, they shifted the profits through the low tax nation of Singapore, right? So this is a new report by a global coalition of trade unions, etc. Now, the report, which has been funded and commissioned by this coalition of trade unions, looks at how McDonald's aggressively use tax strategies to avoid billions of dollars in taxes every year. The reality is something is very wrong. You can put a man on the moon, right? But 40 years later, you can't tax a hamburger. Now, all the government seems to do to save money is drug test dole bludgers, refuse family support for families who don't vaccinate. Now they've come out this week saying fake marriages will be targeted in a new government welfare crackdown.
Yeah.
Right, you don't really love her. Look at her. You know, all this kind of things coming out from the government. What they're doing is sort of saying, the way I see it, is the truth is minorities in our society are being oppressed, and we're kind of being trained to hate these minorities but love the people who are doing the oppressing, which is our government. They're targeting small groups, aren't they? And those small groups tend to vote with a piece of paper like you and I do. However, McDonald's, Microsoft, the mining industry, they vote with money. So I think as a result of the fact that they pay $1 million, they're let off $500 million.
Yeah.
When you and I vote, no one's interested in, a vote on a piece of paper means nothing to a government in a country which is no longer a democracy, which is Australia.